Welcome to Awkward Insurance, fellow insurance folks. I am Dustin Bryant, your coughing, sputtering host today, and Kat is the other. What's up, Kat?
Hello, Dustin. How are you?
I've had better days, but I'm on the mend, and I am super excited for our friend that we have on today. But before we get into that, anything new or exciting? Run into anybody spectacular lately?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that you're coughing and sputtering. I was on that train as well, recovering from COVID. And once I got my negative COVID test, I went, I need to get out of the house. So I actually saw Diana Ross this weekend.
Diana Ross?
Yeah, she's still alive.
Oh my God. Okay. Where did you see Diana Ross this weekend?
So I down in Orlando, and she looked fabulous. She had her peacock color boas and feathers on and her big curly wigs, and I just thought, is she prepared for this humidity? Because it was pretty warm down here. And I kept thinking, how long can she perform it like this? But
so she's still performing too.
She was still performing.
Wow.
I can't say how well she held up in the heat, because after about 45 minutes, I went, okay, I'm tired. Again, recovering from COVID. So after I heard all the songs I wanted to hear, I just went back to bed. But otherwise, it was great.
I bet that was super exciting. I've actually never met a celebrity IRL. Maybe one day I'll get to meet a celebrity in person. I actually have to travel more probably in order to do that, but that's okay. But we have our very own little celebrity with us today, our friend Sarah Munoz, and she is in the insurance industry, or has been in the insurance industry for around 20 years and has held various roles in the industry. She's what do they call it? A jack of all trades? But is it a jack of all trades and a master of none?
Master of all trades as well.
Master of all trades. Awesome. And the industry that she loves so much has also at times been unkind to her. And in fact, without knowing wholly where our conversation is going to lead today, I feel that any woman in insurance, or in the insurance industry, actually the business industry for that matter, might be able to connect with Sarah's experiences in one way or another. I know I can personally connect with some of your experiences. I've had my own experiences as a woman in insurance, particularly a mother in insurance, or in business, if you will. But let's give Sarah the floor. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing great. Living the dream.
Good. Where are you from?
Denton, Texas.
Denton, Texas.
Yeah, it's a small town. Well, it's not that small.
How small are we talking about?
I think there's 100,000 people, but when we first moved here, there's only 30,000. It's just Texas is exploding and all our small towns are turning into big towns.
Oh, well, I'm from a much smaller area of Arkansas. We're right outside of Little Rock, and we, I think, maybe have around 30,000 people, maybe. And then Kat, of course, she's from Florida. So we are so happy to have you here today and talk about your experiences. But first, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us about how you started in the insurance industry.
So I started when I was basically a girl. I did not realize I was a girl, but now that I look back, I know now that I was a girl. I just fell right into it. I needed a part-time job while I was in college, and the State Farm agency, through a temp agency, was hiring, and, I had a pulse, so they were willing to hire me. They told me it was a marketing position. I didn't actually realize that meant telemarketing. And I was a marketing advertising major, not risk management. And so I thought I was going to be doing marketing and advertising when I grew up, but I do insurance. So it's just as good. But yeah, I went in there and I did telemarketing for about 6 months. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this forever. And I went and took another marketing job, ended up being door-to-door sales. And so apparently I don't really know what a marketing job is.
I was going to say, which is worse, door-to-door sales or telemarketing?
Door-to-door sales is incredibly, it was not my thing. I started with Aflac.
You did it too?
Well, I started with Aflac, and I guess it would be more like door-to-door business sales, but I was just like, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. And they're like, what are you here for? I'm like, I don't know. What are you here for?
I sold office supplies. So I just had a big book of office supplies and just walked into offices and I was like, hey, you want my office supplies in my bag? And it ended up being a really good learning experience because I had no experience in sales or how to do that. And
my answer for office supplies would have been wholeheartedly a yes. You should see the number of pens that I have never written with that are sitting on my desk right now. I literally have hundreds of different types of pens.
And that was probably my favorite office to walk into, or the ones that needed ink cartridges, because those were the most expensive items. So I did that for a little while, and it was a multi-level marketing kind of thing. It was a total scam, but I learned a lot about law of large numbers and how to talk to people and how to kind of warm up your gatekeepers and that type of thing. So it served me well. So now in our household, we refer to it as the internship, because since those aren't usually paid very well either. And then I went back to the State Farm agent and just told her, like, hey, I need another job. They didn't have a position open. And she actually referred me over to the lovely gentleman that got me licensed. And when I say lovely, I mean that very sarcastically. But
I couldn't tell.
You've encountered a lot of lovely gentlemen in your career.
I certainly have. Yes. And this particular guy got me licensed. That was the good thing he did for me, and gave me a little bit of experience on how to not sell insurance. So I learned a lot about what I did not want to be like and what I didn't want to do.
Yes.
Sometimes our best examples in life are the examples of what not to do. I come from a household of examples of what not to do. And I feel like I've made it pretty successfully. You're like a background. My kids will always say, Mom, how are you the way you are today? I was like, well, I learned all the secrets on what not to do. So just, pay attention to Mommy and you'll learn what not to do too.
I had that same exact conversation with my kids. I learned how not to be a mom for my mom. I do the opposite, and it seems to be going okay. And also, from this particular guy, like I learned like what insurance is, but I also learned that I didn't want to talk to people like they were beneath me, and that's how he would present his product. Is he would hand them a piece of paper back in the day when people came into your office and you presented quotes to them. And he wouldn't even go over the coverage. He would just say, you're dumb if you don't sign here and get the insurance with me. That was his sales presentation.
Wow. It just makes me think, how people say, well, I'm doing it this way because it's the way it's always been done. Like if we can learn from the bad examples, that means that particular phrase is just a moot point because the way it's always been done is not always the right way.
It is not.
Things.
Yeah.
So before we dive a little deeper into this, Sarah is now a published author. Is this your first book?
It is my first book.
It's your first book. So Sarah has a new book. It's called The Undiscovered Voices, Unlocking the Potential of Women in Insurance. One thing we can kind of already tell from the conversation that we have already started, that we're going to be talking about your experiences in insurance and how it relates to this book. So we can certainly understand that the reason for this book or the content for this book comes from your experiences. But other than your experiences, why did you feel like you needed to put this book into play?
Well, so whenever I'm in rooms with other women versus mixed rooms or rooms with men, we've all learned what conversations we're allowed to have and not allowed to have. You learn that from experience as well. So when I'm talking to other females, a lot of times their struggles were very similar to mine and their ceilings were very similar to mine. And then I'd be in another room with like either mixed company or maybe just guys, and they're complaining that there's not enough talent in the industry. So I kind of like put the two things together. I was like, okay, wait, I'm talented. And these other 5 women that I was just talking to, they're all talented, but we're all having the same obstacles. So what if things became easier for us and talent actually got a chance to excel no matter what gender you were or race or anything else? Like, what if we just judged each other off of talent?
And, one of the things that's interesting about that, because yes, ideally, if we all judged each other just off of talent and skill, it would all be an equal playing field. Obviously, that is not the case, whether it's with women or different racial, socioeconomic issues. So can you explain, like, what is it about our paths within this industry that is holding us back?
So I think one of the things that I kind of go into in the book is figuring out how obstacles are different for everybody. Like how you're talking about obstacles for somebody who maybe came from a background where they didn't have a lot of money, or they weren't raised the same way in the same kind of environment. They're going to have different obstacles than maybe someone who had a more privileged household and a more privileged lifestyle. Or it's just taking everybody's individuality, and all of that like makes us, what makes insurance great is how different everybody is and how we can relate with others. And so if we can identify the obstacles that people have in moving up and the barriers, and then figure out how to slowly remove those.
Yeah, short of these like wide sweeping changes, I mean, there are smaller behavioral, habitual things everyone need to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's different barriers for women than there's men. Like I said, depending on what your background, there's different barriers. But if we can identify what the problem is, and the problem is that I'm identifying in the book is that everyone's complaining there's not enough talent. And not everyone, but there's a lot of people saying, hey, we don't have enough talent. People are afraid to retire. What are we going to do? We have to go and outsource our talent from the Philippines. How are we going to solve this problem? What I'm saying is the talent's there. We just got to find the talent. And 60% of the industry is females, and only 12% make it to the top. So there's a lot more room to move. I can guarantee that there's more than 12% of talented women in the insurance field if there's 60% working in it.
Okay, so I know Kat and I have both read. I've not been able to make it all the way through the book. I don't know how far Kat has made it, but you've had some pretty heinous experiences, which I would assume motivated you to write such a book. Tell us about some of your most powerful moments of motivation, because like we said in the beginning, sometimes you're not always learning from the best examples, you're learning from the worst. And you can find motivation anywhere. It's one of the things that I try to tell my own kids. And even whenever we're talking to some of the kids that are in the CISR high school program that the National Alliance offers, they may come from disadvantaged backgrounds a lot of times. And I try to place in them, it doesn't matter what your background is. It matters what you make of it. Mm-hmm. It matters whether or not you take that negative experience and choose to see the silver lining to it. What did you learn from it? Or if you choose to dwell in that negative experience. And you obviously did not choose to dwell in your negative experiences as brought forth through the book, but also through your success in the industry as well. So tell us a little bit about some of the experiences that have motivated you to be so outspoken about this now.
So the biggest motivator was probably the employer I had in 2016, because he convinced me to take a position which I was kind of ready to move on from where I was working. There was no more room for advancement. They told me straightforward, because for 3 years in a row, I would ask them like, hey, can I move up? Can I become a manager? Can I grow my own team? And it was basically like, no. Like after 2 years in a row, they'd just be like, no, Sarah, just keep doing a good job and we'll talk to you about it next year. And then at the third year, they're like, okay, look, I'm just going to level with you. I'm tired of you asking me. You're a salesperson. You're just going to be selling insurance for us as long as you work here, but you should be happy with what you have, and they actually said, I say in the book executives, but they actually said most women don't make this kind of money. You should be happy with what you're making. I changed it to executives just to make it not seem so harsh in the book, the verbiage, but that was their verbiage. And I was making good money. I mean, like they were right, but it doesn't mean that I was earning it. I mean, I was mostly commission sales. So it wasn't like I wasn't earning the money. And so I didn't really understand that statement. And at the time I was probably like 32, 33 years old. And they told me that, you're getting older. And now I'm like 32, 33 is not older, but he's like, you're getting older. Like, what else are you going to do? Like you should just be happy with what you have.
Because what good is a woman past 30?
Exactly.
My goodness. but I am so worked up. So, as I was reading, Sarah, your book, I was angry reading through it. I was furious. And, kind of like you had said when you started your career, you were still a girl. As a female, oftentimes I started in the industry when I was 21. And yeah, when you're starting off young, I always felt like as a female, let me kind of try to minimize my youthful appearance because I want to be taken more seriously. So let me have people think that I'm older, so I'm taken more seriously. But then you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because then once you get to a certain age, then what good are you? So your entire career path has just been like a lifetime movie.
It has been. It's been a roller coaster ride for sure. I mean, I would say like the worst part of the roller coaster was when I decided to take a leap of faith in 2016 and leave the employer that told me I was never going to move up because I was feeling stuck. I wasn't happy there. I felt stuck. I felt like there was more that I could be doing. And I had been actually interviewing with a lot of large companies at the time, and none of them could match what I was making. They were all going to pay me like 50% less. So I couldn't take that change, even though I wanted to take more of like a marketing type position, because, we all know that I know lots about marketing and what kind of a job a marketing job is. But so he had convinced me to come work for him. It was a smaller agency. He convinced me that it was a larger agency, and he had a sister working for him. And she was like, there was something about him I didn't really trust my gut on. Like there was just something off and I knew it wasn't right. But then his sister was so nice and she was like, oh, he comes off that way sometimes, but he's a great guy. You'll love working for him.
Okay. Can I stop you there for a second? I'm going to stop you there for a second about the O's. The O's are what get me. And I think Kat and I have had a conversation about this before, where there is blatant disrespect. There is blatant oversight where you very clearly see that somebody is using your gender, your identity, whatever it is, in some way against you. And then there's the O's. And I think as women, and I'm going to use this in terms of my grandfather so as to remain on the non-offensive side. I love my grandfather dearly. I looked up to him in so many different ways. He was the biggest piece of my heart that I lost when he passed away. But there were a ton of O's. Oh, that's just grandpa. Oh, that's just the era that he grew up in. Oh, that's just, if you can just look past that and just giggle, I think as women, we are almost brought up in a way to say the O's. Oh, it's okay for somebody to look at you and say, oh, you're so pretty. And you're like, oh, that's just what men are used to say. It's the O's. The O's get me, man, because I consider those just small micro, I don't want to say microaggressions because that's used in a different way. And I don't want to overtake that. But these small little ways that we're just dug at, that we're just supposed to accept, as long as it's not blatant, in your face disrespect, the O's are okay. And they're not.
And I think that there is something that, when we do that, we're excusing this behavior, we're letting it slide, change is not happening. And I think we, men, women, everybody, whatever the situation is, we have to be able to call out those transgressions. And in order to be effective at that, we need to find a way to call out those transgressions without necessarily making it a judgment call on the person.
Right.
And hopefully, I think we, as people in the industry, and Sarah had a great strategy that I don't want to, steal your thunder from, but in how we affect change, which generations we try to do that with. You start with certain generations and there is more awareness and eventually that change does come. So, since I took us there, Sarah, would you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah. So part of my motivation, so this guy in 2016, he was my main kind of like motivator for writing the book. I was telling one of my women friends about my story. We're going over the story. She's like, wow, you have a really interesting story. You should write a book. And I was like, no, I'm not going to write a book. And I think she was just joking. And then my next comment was, I can't write a book because the person that I worked for in 2016 told me if I ever wrote a book, or not, he didn't say ever write a book, sorry. If I ever told the story of what happened while I worked for him, he'd have me blacklisted in the insurance industry. And that actually became my fuel, like my fire that I didn't know I had for writing the book. Cause I was like, so her comment to me was, who's this man and how does he have so much power and control over you? And I hated the fact that it was 2018, I think, when I was having this conversation with her, maybe it was 2019, and he still had that kind of power and control over me. So I wanted to take that power and control back and use it for something good. So that was kind of like, not only am I going to share what happened, obviously not his name or company, but he knows who he is.
Oh goodness. No, my first thoughts on that, beside it being a particular person, is how does anyone ever get off thinking they have that much control over a person? I mean, especially in an entire industry.
Yeah, he had this like huge ego. So it was kind of amazing. And there's things that happened while I worked for him. There's a lot of comments about how pretty I was, and he loves the color of my eyes, and he only hires pretty women to work for him. Stuff like that at first I took it as flattery. And then after working with him for a little while, it started making me feel really uncomfortable. And then he told me at one point, I didn't want him to come to my house to sit at my computer because I worked from home without my husband present. And he told me that I was being ridiculous. I worked for him, so now he owns me. I was like, excuse me? You what? Because I don't even think my husband owns me. So so that didn't sit with me well. And I didn't let him come over to sit at my computer. I was just like, I'll just figure this out on my own. But just a lot of little things, like you said. And they were probably more like bigger aggressions. But at first it started off small and it just kept getting bigger, kind of like an abusive relationship. You don't realize what they're picking away at until it becomes this big, huge sore. And he really hurt my confidence, and my confidence was shaken for a good 3 years after working for him. And I left the credit union that I worked at. I left feeling good about myself, like I was really good at what I was doing. I was always their top producer. To 2 months later, having no income and feeling like a loser, and that I was no good to anyone and had no talent and that type of thing. Like I know it was up to me, but he deflated me, and I had to blow myself up, if you will. And it took a long time to do that. So really that was, if I had not said that one sentence to my friend, I probably wouldn't have written that book. Like had he not made that comment to me back in 2016, I wouldn't have had that fire in me to write it. And then the other thing is I was looking at my daughter, and she's a Generation Z. So she's 17 now, but she was 15 when I started on the book. And so I'm like always complaining to her. And she's always like, Mom, if you want to see a change, you have to make it. If you want to see a change, you have to make it, like constantly. And I'm just like, whatever, Mia, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So she's part 2 is I just want the world to become a better place for her generation and just keep improving. And I don't want her to have these same obstacles that I've had to face at this, like she's going to have her own obstacles, but I want the gender obstacles to be off the table.
So do you think it's going to start with Generation Z to really start making those effective changes? How do we do that?
No, it starts now.
Well, yeah, of course it starts now, but as far
why we gotta wait for Gen Z? I've got a Gen Zer too. She's on the younger side. She's 10 years old. I'm not waiting for her. No, we're not gonna start with Gen Z.
But who's going to be effective in making starting those waves of change?
I think. I think that the generation now has to realize that there's a problem, and the problem isn't just, it's not you, Kat, it's not you, Dustin, it's not me, Sarah, because that's what I felt like for the longest time. Everyone would say, well, you had all these bad experiences, you're the problem. I wanted to put some light. I wanted to put the problem in the light and say, you're not alone. This is not your problem. This is a company, like a business problem, an insurance industry problem. This is a society problem. Like this is a problem that we have that we're kind of like, like you said, like kind of brushing off. Like it's not really still happening. People aren't really being hurt, when they get pregnant. They're not really having their career slow down. They're not really having that many obstacles. It's not really that much harder. Like, let's take that away, because it is still very difficult to move up and move past a certain point. So let's put all that in the light and make sure everyone knows that they're not alone. It's not like us women, we're not the problem. And I'm not saying that men are the problem either. I'm saying that it's the way the setup is. The setup is the problem.
So let me ask, because one of the things that you had talked about too was the disadvantages in networking you've had. You know, I don't recall if it was you specifically or one of the other women that you've highlighted asking where to get golf lessons, and your boss saying you're not there yet.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah,
you can't play golf because you're not where at the golf course.
But because it brings up. Yeah, as women, networking is going to be different. I mean, I was saying earlier, I don't watch sports. I don't care about sports. But there were times in my career where before going into a meeting, I would try to memorize the front page of the sports section just so I could understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the men that you had quoted had also said that it's easier to network with other men because they don't have to worry about what they say.
You know, there are certain things that, like, let's face it, like, we probably at work should not be talking about certain things, whether we're male or female, we should not be talking about those certain things. And, you know, sexual harassment, absolutely should not be a thing. But you shouldn't be afraid to have, you know, a casual conversation with somebody either. And like one of the things that one of I think it was Erica in the book, the one you're talking about, the golf lessons, is when she was asking her boss, you know, and trying to figure out like, why can't I take golf lessons? Why can't I be around more guys? And they were like, well, we don't feel comfortable because we can't say or do whatever we want. Well, they were saying and doing uncomfortable things because at one point, and I didn't share this part of the story because her story ended up being really long, so I didn't get to include all of it. But at one point, they got too comfortable with her and they were sharing things that were inappropriate. Mm-hmm. So there has to be like a line, like a professional line that is made to where professionally, you know, if you're friends with someone outside of work and you have cocktails with them and it's not a networking work thing, like you're one-on-one good friends, that's something different. But as far as professionalism goes, there should definitely be lines drawn on where appropriate and inappropriate are. And so that we know, like, okay, this is the line we don't cross. Like, don't make the line a dot.
Right.
So, and I didn't want to like create fear in the book. I wanted to create awareness, but I also wanted like I'm hoping that men will read it and think, oh, I didn't realize that when I tell someone that they should smile more because they'll look prettier, that maybe I should focus more on like what their attributes are. Or maybe I didn't realize I was seeing them as just a service person when they really want to be a producer, or they could be good at that too. I wanted to kind of, you know, put the awareness out there, but not in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that we could start see a change and then show how to start making those changes, like how to find that.
All of these behaviors, they're historically ingrained. And it's something that has, I mean, like I tell my kids, when this topic comes up at the dinner table, and I don't like it because then everything gets all political at the table and I'm just trying to eat the dinner. You know, when my older child will try to ask about, I'm like, well, you know, it honestly, it comes down to this. It's at one point in history, women, they couldn't vote, they couldn't work. And our history was built on that just because that is what was right at the time. That doesn't mean that it was right. And we've obviously learned that it wasn't, but you can only do so much with the information you have at the time, and people learn and they grow and they get better. And that's what I feel like, you correct me if I'm wrong, the book is about, is learning and growing and being better. Going back to, just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean that's the way it needs to continue to be done. And that's not just from the men's side, it's from the female side too. In relating back to the O's, it was the owner's sister that said, oh, that's just the way he does things or says things or whatever. She didn't have to do that, but she may not have been aware that she was being dismissive with her O. You know, so it's not, I don't want to come off as though this whole thing is like men bashing and men behaviors and everything else. There's a component of that, but my own experiences that are that I relate to your book, mine were actually from females that were ingrained with this ideology of you're a mother, you need to find somebody else to support you, to take care of your kids so you can focus on your career. No, I don't. That's not who I am. That came from a female. That didn't come from a male. But somewhere along the way, it could have come from a male for her. And she internalized it and then regurgitated it because that's the way it's always been done.
Right. Yeah. And I've noticed as far as like comparing myself to other maybe women in the industry or other successful people that I've seen in the industry, I felt like my career took longer to take off because I became a mom younger versus some of these other people that I see that they are like in high level positions and I'm very jealous of them. And I'm learning that they're in a different place. They had a different experiences. But maybe they didn't start having their families till 35, 40 years old, having the first kid. Whereas I had my first kid at like 26. So there's a difference. And I got married at 21. I didn't realize, no one told me that I was a teenager when I got married. So I wish they would have.
Did you say you felt like you had your kids young? 26 was young to have kids? I was 24.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty decent age. Like I had a good, healthy pregnancy. But a lot of the other people that were like heads and shoulders above me career-wise, they waited until they were in their mid to late 30s. So they had already built their career and then they have kids. But we shouldn't have to slow down just because we have kids. Like just like you, Dustin, like I didn't want to slow down just because I had a baby. In fact, that made me want to gear up because my husband is a blue collar worker. He was only going to make a certain amount and I wanted more for my kids. So that gave me more fuel for wanting more. Just like Mia drives me to always want more. And plus she's so much smarter than me. So she's always challenging me.
That just means you're doing a really good job.
I hope so.
So in all of the adversity that we're talking about, and we can take all kinds of inferences because I don't think we've touched on any one specific instance as an example, but let's kind of shift the conversation a little bit. If you're a woman, a man, a whomever, how can we overcome these? You brought up sponsorships and mentorships in your book. Can you explain the difference between a sponsorship and a mentorship and how you use these tools to start overcoming these blockades, if you will?
So really finding somebody to put the word out about you and say, I trust this person. This person's very talented. These are the attributes that I see in Sarah. I know that she can go really far and really take your company to the next level, or she really deserves this promotion for ABC. And this is usually influential people that are going to sponsor you. But these are the ones that are getting you to the seat at the table, if you will. These are the ones like shouting at you on the rooftop, you're awesome. And this is why. And so that's your sponsor. They're sponsoring you, and like in exchange, you're going to do an awesome job at whatever they're sponsoring you at. And then a mentor, though, is somebody that you look up to that's going to take you under their wing and show you how to really get to the next level in your career and what to do to become better and grow. So you can use both.
How do you find one of these? Because I'm thinking about my younger self.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a sponsor. I would say that I had a mentor. And now that I think about it, I would say that maybe there were hints of somebody sponsoring by default, if you will, just because of the character of who I was and how well I performed my job. It's easy to talk about how well somebody performs when you witness it firsthand. But I'm thinking about the younger version of me. I didn't have anybody like that. And I was certainly not in the position where I thought I could ask somebody to be that for me. And that's a huge burden to take on too, to be honest with you. I think of it kind of like a co-loan where you ask somebody to be a co-borrower on your first car for you. And that's a huge risk to make sure that you're going to pay your payments for the first time. For a sponsor, particularly somebody that's newer in business, how do you ask someone to be your sponsor and then live up to their expectation?
Yeah. So I think that it's really important for at the company level to try to pair people up. Sponsorships, though, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone from the same industry. It could just be somebody that that has a lot of influence. They don't have to work at the same company, as long as you have to build that relationship with them. But at the company level, the companies need to realize that these high level positions where they're just keeping all the information to themselves and not showing others how to move into these higher level positions.
Yes.
It should trickle down, and there should be some kind of incentive. Like, I need you to mentor this next group down, and then that group is going to mentor the next group down. And then eventually you're going to get to your lowest level, and everybody has some kind of skin in the game where they want to watch the next level, the level below them, succeed.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've seen a lot of, particularly in the insurance industry, is people protecting their information, people protecting their skill set, if you will, and wanting to be that person, the gatekeeper, the one that keeps all of the information, all of the knowledge, the one that everybody has to go to, because that makes you feel secure. What is it? Job security? That makes you feel secure in your position, and nobody can take that away from you. You're also the one that if you do leave, you're leaving that business struggling on so many forefronts because you have not divulged your information to somebody else. And I think one of my, the mentor that means the most to me, the one that where I moved from the female that said I needed to find somebody else to support my child while she was going through medical issues. When I moved from that to this one, the difference in the mentality was I am training you to be my replacement, not literally my replacement. But I mean, seriously, if you get hit by a bus the next day, where is all of your knowledge? It's in your brain inside of a casket. It's nowhere else that everybody can find it. Of course, SharePoint and cloud sharing is making that easier these days. But before that, it was all on everybody's hard drive, right? You couldn't get into that person's computer without their password. And if you didn't have their password, then sorry, you're starting from scratch all over again. And that's something that I've noticed so much in the insurance industry is that harboring of information instead of sharing it, not training others to be your replacement. That doesn't literally mean that you want them to replace you, but you want somebody that's like you to replace you, right? So train the next generation of people to be that. And that's exactly that's the plan. That's what everybody should be doing. That's just being it together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had learned early in on my career, and I don't even know who told me, but they had said, if you're not duplicating yourself, you're not succeeding. And so that was advice they gave to me. It was a mentor somewhere, but they were like, if you're the only one that could do your job and you're not showing other people how to do it as well or better, you're not successful. You're not doing a good job.
People want to duplicate those things that are successful. And if you're not duplicating yourself, you might want to check in on that. You know what I'm saying? That's what I got from that. If you're not duplicating yourself, you might want to sit with that for a minute and think about why.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that we talk about the importance of the training, just for the roles, for the companies that we're in, because that in and of itself seems to have been just such a huge obstacle for you, is just getting thrown in the job without having had the training.
Kat, you touched on something that Sarah touched on in her book, is the education or the training part of it. In Sarah's book, she says that training was non-existent. And I feel like that's something that's honestly, it's very common in the insurance industry. And I think we all joke about it and just by saying, here's your desk, have fun. That's literally how I started my career in insurance, was here's your desk, have fun. That's how I feel like my career was stagnant, is because the training opportunity was hard. And that's where, shameless plug here, and I know I'm employed by the National Alliance, but shameless plug here, that's where the National Alliance came in for me, was at the agency that I was with at the time. There wasn't a clear training path. It was, you're going to learn how to read a policy or read declarations pages by opening the mail. You're going to be the mail opener. You open the mail and you read what's on there, and you have no idea what you're even reading, but eventually it will make sense. Well, but at the same time, you're also going to be required to go and get your CISR, your Certified Insurance Representative designation. And that's when it started making sense. But there was a time when I realized, okay, I've been doing this for a minute. I've got my CISR designation. I want to do something else. And that's when I realized predominantly all the women in this agency had CISRs, and it was the men or the female producers that had made it that far that had the CICs. And there was, when I started asking to do more, there was no, oh, well, you need to go and get your CIC and then we'll talk about. It was just like, it was me. I was supposed to have the drive to do it. Well, I did, of course, because I saw, CISR to CIC, and I could build that naturally for myself. It was made easy for me that way. So if you don't have a training plan, that's where it started for me. But yeah, the insurance industry is lacking this training path of how to succeed.
Mm-hmm. But we talk about like these changing behaviors and changing mindsets, and changing mindsets is, can be such a hard, task, but just even developing a training plan. What an easy, actionable thing that any company, any organization, any agency, regardless of your size, okay, yeah, you might not be able to change how grandpa views the value of women overnight, but
yes,
start with a training plan. Have that clearly outlined, thereby empowering every person within your agency to succeed by having those clear steps.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, not just empowering, but setting a standard, because when you set a training plan and a standard, well, it doesn't say when
right.
females obtain CISR and when males obtain CIC, this is what happens. No, you set the training plan. When you achieve this, this is what happens. When you achieve step 2, this is what happens. And that takes out the inequities of gender and race and age. It's, it's based on your merits. You're doing what you were asked to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you touched a little bit, Dustin, on career pathing. So you take the training and then you can build on it and create a career path, like an avenue for people to go. And if you know that you have a chance to move up in a company and you have a career path, that keeps people like the talent in-house. There's no reason to go anywhere else if you know that you have opportunity.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. We're running out of time a little bit. This has been a really fun conversation. A little deep.
We've been so worried.
I know, a little deep, and I feel like we could go even deeper, but I kind of want to end with this. Let's talk about Mia. Mia's your daughter. And in writing your book, and you mentioned this to us when we had met you previously, but also, just in reading your book, when you wrote your book, you asked your daughter to write a piece in the book. You asked her about why she wasn't interested in the insurance industry. Now, you can go to the book and you can read Mia's response about that. And obviously, you see from the way the question was posed that she's not interested in the insurance industry. What I want to know is, why was it important for you to have your daughter either be a part of the book or to explain her perspective on this issue?
Well, for one, I wanted to get a Gen Z perspective, and who better to get the perspective than my own daughter, who has seen it firsthand. But also, Gen Z sees things differently, and I wanted people to see from the lens of somebody who has seen her mom in the insurance industry. Had I had this super easy career to the top and everything was amazing, obviously I wouldn't have written the book if I had that. But if everything was easy peasy and, she had the good life, she would probably consider a career in insurance. She'd be like, yeah, like insurance is awesome. Opportunities are awesome. I'm going to be awesome like my mom. Instead, she's like, okay, well, it's been kind of hard and I don't want to go through all that struggle. I'm going to go somewhere where I can make a difference, or where it's easier for women to get what they want out of their career. And I really wanted Gen Z is gonna be a key for the future of keeping talent in the industry. Like there's so many books about attracting the millennials. Well, the millennials are all grown folk at this point. And now it's all about the Gen Z.
What? I'm grown folk?
A grown folk. That's how we talk in Texas.
That's how we talk in Arkansas too.
So it's all about like showing the Gen Z, like, look how awesome this career path is. Like, why don't you let's take them over into the light instead of like to the dark side is what Mia would say. Let's take them into the light side and show them how awesome this industry is so that we can attract more of them. And then at some point, we're going to have to turn people away because we have too much talent. We're going to be like, whoa, how awesome are you? Because you're going to have to be real awesome to make it into this career path. And that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That's amazing that you included her perspective in your book. I bet it's something that she's going to cherish forever. I don't think it's just in the insurance industry. I think it's in whatever industry has been ingrained from our path, unless it was an industry that was thought of by a female and started by a female. I feel like, this issue is going to be prevalent no matter where she goes. So I would challenge her to try the insurance industry anyways and make a mark on it.
Yes. Be the change, Mia.
Yes, I would challenge any female, regardless of age, to, be the change that they want to see. Same for men. I don't want to make it always about gender. It's not always about gender. We're all capable of listening with our ears and making the proper decisions. I don't want to say assumptions or anything like that, but making the proper decisions. You might not agree with your own decision, but sometimes that's what's right, is what you disagree with. I applaud you for your voice. I applaud you for putting that into a book in writing that is here forever. It is not going away. It will not be silenced. And that's an amazing, powerful step, and one that I protect in my journal. It will never be published. So you're an amazing human being, Sarah. Thank you so much for being on the Awkward Insurance podcast with us today. Any final parting words?
Yeah, I like how you touched on, this isn't just about a book about insurance. It's really about women in business and making some changes so that the future can see a more equitable, even playing field, and make the world awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. And thank you for lending your voice to so many of the women that have had similar experiences, and showing us how we can prevent the next generation of women from having those experiences.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging around for another awkward conversation in insurance.
Stay tuned for new episodes from Awkward Insurance wherever you listen to your podcasts. And be sure to check out the National Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or at scic.com.
Now go forth and be awkward.
Toodles!
Toodles!